Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live right after Guy Benson now at 3 o'clock here on 790 KBC, and all this before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. Following the very latest, of course, on the Southern California firestorm disaster, and the fire still actively burning. Stay with 790 KBC for the very latest on the ongoing catastrophic deadly firestorm we've experienced here in Southern California and the ongoing wind and fire watches heading into tonight. The massive recovery effort underway. Preparations for possible mudslides with rain finally in the forecast by this weekend. Meanwhile, a brush fire erupted early this afternoon along the 405 northbound in Seal Beach, impacting traffic there. The so-called Hughes fire in the Castaic area has now burned more than 10,000 acres and is still far from containment. That's the fire that started yesterday along Lake Hughes Road near Castaic Lake and the 5 freeway. And you might have heard of the Laguna fire today. That's what it's being called. That one is in Ventura County near Camarillo. Crews have stopped the forward progress of that fire at last word. It broke out this morning in the Oxnard Plains area of Ventura County. It was quickly jumped on by firefighters near Hueneme and Laguna roads. The Cal State University Channel Islands campus in that area was ordered to evacuate. Overnight, a brush fire erupted in the Sepulveda Pass along the 405 freeway near Bel Air. That was quickly stopped at 40 acres by hundreds of firefighters. Firefighters still working to fully contain the other major fires in the area, including the massive one in the Palisades and the Eaton fire in the Pasadena-Altadena area. Those have damaged or destroyed about 16,000 structures and have killed at least 28 people, according to CAL FIRE. Taking a look at the financial markets today, we did see stocks ending mostly higher today with the S&P 500 achieving a record high, the first record finish since December and the first record high of President Trump's second term. The Federal Reserve and other central banks not likely to hop to such a demand, with President Trump speaking in Davos today to powerful political and business leaders there, called on OPEC to lower oil prices and made a demand for lower interest rates here in the U.S. and indeed around the world. The president's comments could help give OPEC an excuse to boost production. We have seen oil move lower lately on the president's executive orders promoting domestic oil production. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 408 points, settling at 44,565, slightly off its previous record high, which we saw last month. It was the S&P 500, which achieved a record high today of 32 points, closing at 6,119, surpassing the previous record high of 6,090. And the NASDAQ also in the plus column today of 44 points at 20,054, also just off its record high close, which we saw last in December. President Trump this week ordering federal employees to return to their offices to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. The president also said he would like to lower the corporate income tax rate from 21%, the level that was set in the 2017 Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, to 15% for businesses that make products here in the U.S. President Trump also calling for renewing cuts to personal income tax rates that will expire at the end of the year without action from Congress. I'll discuss the latest executive orders and the outlook on taxes and all this with Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, who'll be joining us live later this hour. President Trump says he plans to head to Southern California tomorrow to visit the areas impacted by the fires. The last time the president came to Los Angeles was last September, ahead of the November presidential election. At that time, he spoke in Rancho Palos Verdes, which was impacted by landslides. President Trump did speak to reporters at the Trump National Golf Course and also met with the Rancho Palos Verdes Mayor John CRUIKSHANK. And the Honorable John CRUIKSHANK, who happens to be a civil engineer and, of course, is tracking the situation there in his city, as well as the fire disaster area throughout Southern California, will be joining us live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works under the new Trump 2.0 administration. Joining us live now, the one and only Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes magazine, author of numerous books. His latest, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Good afternoon, Steve Forbes.
Good to be with you, Frank. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you with us. Certainly a lot to talk about. Give us your reaction to the early days of the second Trump administration and what we've seen in the markets and the economy so far.
Well, it's a dizzying pace. Hardly 5 minutes go by without some new executive order, appointment, speech, demand, whatever. And so I think people find the amount of energy refreshing, especially when on inauguration night, the president signed some executive orders while simultaneously holding a press conference, saying more words in an hour than his predecessor did in a year. And but the key thing to watch out for now is what kind of tax bill is the White House going to introduce in Congress. There's still some debate internally about whether to offer a big omnibus bill, a big beautiful tax cut bill, or whether to split it in a couple of parts and do what they call reconciliation bills 2 or 3 times rather than do it in a grand one. It would be a mistake if they don't try to get as much done at the beginning. You have the momentum, you have the popular support, and they do it, as they say, when the iron is hot. And that means not only renewing the 2017 tax cuts, but also adding in new tax cut, not just Social Security, but also reducing the capital gains tax. That would obviously be good for investment. But also the nice thing, Frank, about the capital gains tax is when you reduce the rate, you get more revenue immediately, not a year from now, 2 years from now. It's up front because people realize of gains already existing. And when there's a low penalty, people realize more gains more quickly and move the money to other kinds of opportunities.
On there live with Steve Forbes, who also ran for president. We do remember that, and we remember your card, the flat tax proposal that you had as one of your campaign ideas. And might that idea come back here, and might we see ultimately a flat tax in this current administration?
I think the answer is I'll be cautiously optimistic and say yes. My friend Steve Moore, an economist, and I did a piece in the Wall Street Journal the other day calling for a flat tax. In the 2017 bill, they doubled the exemption. So only 1 out of 10 taxpayers now use deductions in their tax returns. Most take what they call the standard deduction, which is now about $30,000 per couple. So we're already on the way. And we proposed 2 15% rates, 15% corporate rate, which the president endorses for domestic activities, but also a 15% rate for individuals and small businesses, which would make the country a magnet. So I think Trump is the one president who would go for something like a simplified tax code. I used to say bury it, but the EPA wouldn't allow it. It's so toxic. But get rid of the current code, replace it with one with generous exemptions for adults and for kids. The one I put on the table, your first couple's first $53,000 family of 4, first $53,000 of income would be free of federal income tax, $53,000 of salary, and above that only 17 cents on the dollar. So it's doable. Other countries have done it, and the sooner we do it, I think the more prosperous the country would be because we wouldn't be spending 6.5 billion hours a year filling out tax forms. And that 6.5 billion number comes from the IRS.
On the line with Steve Forbes, we heard President Trump speak to the Davos gathering there, that high-profile gathering of business and political leaders advocating for bringing manufacturing back to the United States. What did you think of his comments there at Davos? L.A., by the way, is the largest manufacturing region in the United States, so we're going to be listening to what you have to say about that.
Well, my friend Charles Payne on a TV show of Fox the other day said the meeting in Davos is like the meeting of the Soviet Union in its final days. the real action is here in the U.S. Yep. I think in terms of manufacturing, the president made noises about putting tariffs on countries that don't invest here. If you put in the kind of tax cuts they're considering, you're going to have investment money flooding into this country because trouble as our economy may be, it's better than those of Europe, most of Europe and Japan and China, and people want to go where the opportunities are. So you don't have to threaten people. They're going to come voluntarily. So I think you're going to see, especially with AI, artificial intelligence, that does frighten people, but it's going to be a fantastic tool in not only with current manufacturing, but creating new industries that we can't even conceive today. I'm old enough to remember back in the late 1970s when PCs first came along, Apple and the like. People were wondering, what do you use these things for? Do you use them to keep track of your recipes or whatever? Who needs them? Well, we all know what happened after that. So I think you're going to see a lot of new things that we can't even think of today.
PC, of course, is personal computers for those who who need that to be explained. We rarely even hear the term PC anymore, so we have to mention that.
And it's
right?
amazing. Everyone has a handheld. And one of the amazing things about the handhelds we have today is that it's a supercomputer. And if you had said 25, 30 years ago, Grandma could use a supercomputer, which once was the size of a house, now you can do it in your hand and anyone can do it. And so I think you're going to see amazing advances that'll be marvelous in our minds today, but then we take it for granted. Oh, big deal, handheld. It's amazing.
It is really amazing. And then you add AI to that mix. And one big thing after another, of course, the other thing that happened today is that President Trump officially signed the first pro-crypto executive orders in U.S. history. I'm not sure if you have the laser eyes on yet, but certainly we have to pay attention to this meteoric rise in Bitcoin and some of the other cryptos here, and now pro-crypto administration in place. What are your thoughts about what's ahead on the crypto front?
Well, I'm still a bit cautious just because so much has happened so quickly. The technology is marvelous, but I think I'd rather invest in gold. I'd rather invest in stocks, especially those that pay dividends. And one area I think is going to have a lot of promise in the next few years is healthcare, where the way we deliver healthcare, I think, is going to profoundly change, where actually you're going to see in the next decade patients controlling the money rather than third parties like insurance companies, employers, Medicare, Medicaid, and the like. And that revolution is just beginning, and I think it's going to have a profoundly positive impact with a real consumer market in healthcare and get some of these crazy costs under control through the lash of the marketplace. People comparing, what are you offering? Why are you charging 10 times as much for this procedure as another hospital? And so I think you're going to get a real consumer revolution there. Patients in charge. How about that?
Wonderful. Very interesting. And I should be noted that Warren Buffett, the famous investor who once called crypto rat poison, apparently is now also invested in some forms of cryptocurrency. So things are changing very, very quickly. And, of course, I'm sure you must...
One thing on that. The federal government, the Federal Reserve, must not issue a cryptocurrency because that would be used as a tool of invading our privacy, seeing everything you spend your money on. So let crypto remain in private hands. I don't want the government having a cryptocurrency. That would be a tool of oppression.
And it looks like the major banks also coming around on crypto. Among the movers and shakers you talk to, what kind of conversations do you have about crypto, especially among the bankers?
Well, there's nothing like a big new market to change people's minds. And, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions involved here. Better take a look at it. So yes, but again, I would urge very real caution on that. I think we're still in the infancy stage on trying to really evaluate these things. So you can have some, but I'm maybe too old for this game, but I like things that I can touch.
Understood. And we speak to the biggest fans of crypto as well as the harshest critics, and we all learn from each other in this process. So, Steve Forbes, we do appreciate that. And let me ask you, you must know a lot of people who have been impacted by the fires here in Southern California. President Trump is scheduled to visit the fire-ravaged areas. What are your thoughts about this and the recovery effort underway as the firefight here continues?
It's just beyond imagination. I have relatives, including a granddaughter, who had to evacuate in the L.A. area, and this is just beyond comprehension, horrific. And I hope that what comes out of it is that the once great state of California gets serious about removing underbrush rather than the lackadaisical approach they've been taking. stop flushing half of the annual rainfall water in California into the Pacific Ocean. Crazy. No new big reservoirs since 1979. Let's get serious about this stuff. The magnitude and the wave and the magnitude of this destruction was avoidable with sensible procedures. And it's a tragedy that we see this unfolding and still going on weeks later. Fires breaking out in your area and other parts of Southern California.
That's right, and harrowing night near Bel Air. As a matter of fact, just last night, luckily that fire was stopped at 40 acres, and it's been unbelievable as these fires continue to pop up, but looks like rain is on the way, but now there's concerns about mudslides and another disaster possibly in the making here, so there's some preparations for that as well. The leadership, of course, has come under scrutiny here in California as well as locally. Prominent business leader Rick Caruso, for example, has pointed to failed leadership. What are your thoughts about leadership here in the Los Angeles area?
He's right. It is failed leadership. And as we mentioned, water policy and also other policies. On the house building, why is a typical house in California cost 2 to 3 or 4 times as much as a similar house in Texas or Florida? It's absolutely nutty regulation. You have 2 laws that were passed years ago that are an invitation to nuisance lawsuits and lawsuits to development. The crazy wave of lawsuits is like mosquitoes with malaria in certain parts of the world. It's deadly. And so a project that in other states might just take a few months to bring to fruition can take years in California. So a lot of them are undone. So it's all part of California's leadership, governance, getting back to the real world. When you go to California, you hate to leave, and then you look at the governance there, and you say, gosh, they're trying to push people out of the state. It's nuts. Stop it. We want California to be a place we want to go to and stay there.
Yes. We got to get you here more often, too, and look forward to your next visit. While we have you on the line, we're on the air, by the way, with Steve Forbes, and you follow what's happening around the world very closely. Obviously, the change of leadership in Washington being welcomed in Israel with the release of some of the hostages there, and we're following closely the developments between Russia and Ukraine, as well as China. Give us your thoughts here on these, and Iran, of course, too. Give us your thoughts here on the geopolitical front under the new Trump administration.
Well, I think there again, they're going to have to make some big decisions. One is Iran and its nuclear program. Is it time to take it out? Iran has never been as weak as it is today, thanks to the Israelis. Their economy is troubled. And that decision has to be made soon. Iran is on the cusp of that. In terms of Ukraine, I'm going to go against the popular opinion here. I think you have to be very cautious about throwing Ukraine under the rug, under the bus to Vladimir Putin. And our security is dependent on what happens in Ukraine because Putin wants to undo the security arrangements we've had for 70 years in Europe. China is still making a very aggressive moves in the South China Sea. Our Navy is not keeping up. One of the new things I hope will happen in this administration is examining what kind of Navy should we be building in the future. As you know, battleships decades ago were the big thing in the Navy, and Pearl Harbor took care of that, and then we went to aircraft carriers. Well, the question they have to answer now is the aircraft carrier going the way of the battleship in the past? Are we making the right weapons, the right ships, the right drones, and the like for how the world is evolving? So very basic things are should be under consideration, and we're going to have to devote more resources, which also gets to a boring subject but critical, and that is the procurement system at the Pentagon, which is an absolute disaster. Literally tens of billions over a few years, hundreds of billions that we could save. You know, we all know Moore's law. Well, in the Pentagon, it's called EROM's law. Instead of getting more efficient, they get more inefficient, and projects that could be done in a few years end up taking years and years, cost overruns, decades. It's got to change.
And speaking of government efficiency, Elon Musk now in the mix on this Department of Government Efficiency. Looks like they have a Doge clock now on the on the deficit calculator I saw today. What do you think of Elon Musk's involvement in all of this and improving government efficiency?
Anything that can improve, bring about less waste in the government, which is resources from we the people, we should be applauding. Regulations are a form of taxation, and the previous administration enacted, in terms of total cost, more regulations than the several previous ones put together. Thankfully, they're starting to reverse some of this insanity, so that'll be very helpful. And I hope they all focus on that. In terms of spending, I think they'll be making some reductions, but that's going to be an unglamorous, ongoing project. One thing Trump did in his first term was take seriously undoing crazy rules and regulations, and it had a real positive impact. Unfortunately, President Biden reversed it all, but I think we're going to get it back again, and businesses can actually focus on doing business rather than coping with bureaucracies. Serve the customer, not the government.
Get more red carpet and less red tape out there for businesses across the board. I wish we had more time. As always, certainly Forbes magazine probably more popular than ever. Certainly a good time to be doing business news at the moment, a tremendous demand for it. So I hope we get a chance to speak more often here, Steve Forbes. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon. Wonderful to speak with you again.
Look forward to talking again. Lots to discuss.
That's for sure. We really appreciate it. Steve Forbes, Chairman, Editor-in-Chief of Forbes Media, which includes Forbes Magazine. His latest book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Live with us here, Mottek On Money, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Record-shattering day for the stock market. The S&P 500 closing at a record high of 32 points at 6,119. The Dow popped 408 points to 44,565, getting close to its record high. The Nasdaq of 44 at 20,054, also close to its all-time high. The yield in the 10-year note, 4.65%. Gold pulling back right now, down about $3 at $2,761.80. Crypto moving higher today. Right now, Bitcoin up about 300 at 103,636. Ethereum up about 67 to 3,317. And Doge at the moment at 35 cents. The latest news for you here now on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. President Trump ordering federal employees to return to their offices to work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Apparently, the new policy is work or get fired. President Trump said he would like to lower the corporate income tax rate, too, from 21%, which was the level set in the 2017 Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, to 15% for businesses that manufacture here in the USA. He also called for renewing cuts to personal income tax rates that will expire at the end of the year without action from Congress. Following all of this closely, joining us live now, Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, America's leading taxpayer advocate. Grover Norquist, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good to be with you.
Wonderful to have you with us. And on January 20th, did you wake up thinking it's morning in America?
Well, the president has laid out a future of taking the corporate rate, as you said, down to 15%, which will make us very competitive compared to China and Europe. And his position is we should compete internationally on trade by having lower taxes and less expensive regulations, not lower wages. And that's the choice. You can either have an expensive government or you can have well-paid workers, because if you've got high taxes, when we compete overseas, the way to compete is drop wages. That's not where the president wants to go. It's looking very good that we're going to get some real progress on lower taxes. I think that is going to pass, and I think the president's commitment to 15%, keeping small business expensing going, the lower taxes for Subchapter S pass-through small businesses, that will go as well. There may be some other tax cuts in there, but it's largely what he passed back 8 years ago, and which really got the economy moving until COVID, and then sadly until Biden.
On the air live with Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. You worked with President Reagan, whose slogan was "It's Morning in America," to create Americans for Tax Reform. Does this time remind you of when President Reagan got his second term, defeating Walter Mondale back in the mid '80s, and the economy was roaring back then.
It does, and it's even better because not only back then Reagan had the House, the Senate was Republican, but it was pre-Reagan Republican. They weren't always for lower taxes and less spending. Many of them were, but not all the Republicans. And the Democrats ran the Senate, the House. What we have now is a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and these are Reagan-Trump Republicans. Their default position is spend less, tax less, regulate less. It's a very good structure to build off of. And his decision to talk about getting the federal government workers to show up for work. I'm looking at a study here that was done in 2024 where the Inspector Generals called the 76 different phone lines that the IRS has. If you have a problem with the IRS, there's 76 different lines that you can call for different problems. When you call them, this is the government checking to see whether the government IRS is doing their job right. 56 of the phone numbers sent callers directly to voicemail. 16 had voicemail boxes that were completely full, so you couldn't even leave a message. 2 were not in service. Only 2 of 76 numbers had a live operator at the other end. And this is the IRS that Joe Biden showered something like $80 billion he wanted onto the IRS, because if they only had more money, they might answer the phones. These people are working at home. They're not answering the phone. I've had this problem myself, trying to get problem. I've called 3 days in a row on hold for more than an hour a day. And then they come on and say, we'll be with you in a moment. They come on and say, call tomorrow. We're not going to get to you today. This is 10 o'clock in the morning. The work of government, and there is some legitimate work of government, is not getting done. We need people into the offices, and we now know we need fewer people than we've been paying.
On there live with Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. If you caught this story, there's so much going on in the news, but looks like there's now a Doge clock, so-called Doge clock, added to the U.S. debt clock, which tracks how much money is being saved by the Department of Government Efficiency. What are your thoughts about how this has come together with Elon Musk in charge of that?
Oh, I think this is extremely helpful on so many levels. You have the president trying to get the people who work for him, who are supposed to be working for him, to do their job, some of whom don't have any interest in helping. You have Congress, which can hold hearings going on how the IRS behaves or misbehaves, how whether people go to work or don't go to work, whether the labor unions protect people who've committed crimes, who don't come to work for months at a time. But you also now have X, Twitter. Every time Elon Musk and Doge find an example of waste or fraud or abuse, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you could find something really interesting like that, but the Washington Post wasn't interested in writing about it, and the New York Times wasn't, and CBS and ABC and NBC and PBS, they could care less about waste in government. But Twitter, with one tweet, Elon Musk can take an idea and a fact that he found, something he's exposed, and make it out to tens of millions of people. And then the establishment press actually has to cover it.
We are live with America's leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. It's been a head-spinning week with all these executive orders. Anything else that's top of mind, getting your attention? Obviously, we have a pro-crypto president now, a pro-oil president, pro-domestic oil and energy production president, and the list goes on.
The executive orders that he put out, ordering people show up for work, or 9 to 5 show up for, most people do that, not government workers in Washington. And it's not just in Washington. Only about 15% of government workers work in the Washington, D.C. area. The others are spread all around the country. There are federal buildings in many major cities that are empty, almost empty. People are not going into work. They're not getting what needs to be done. And as the comptroller of the Pentagon told me, we have 700,000 bureaucrats, meaning civilian employees working for the Pentagon. That's how many we had at the height of the Cold War. There are now fewer Army, Navy, and Air Force people because we won the Cold War and the Soviet Union's several thousand miles back from where it once was and is busy rusting. But we still have 700,000 bureaucrats. There are 200,000 more civilians in the Pentagon than we need. Those are resources that could be used to have a stronger military. They could reduce taxes. There's a lot of government waste. And now, finally, Trump has decided we're going to focus on that. And this is not something that we should be wasting our money on. This money belongs to taxpayers, not to the government.
Grover, thanks very much for the call this afternoon. Look forward to many more exciting conversations here as we track all of this. Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Thanks very much for joining us live here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. President Trump says he plans to head to Southern California tomorrow to visit the areas affected by the ongoing wildfires and deadly fire disaster areas. Details of this visit have not yet been released. President Trump telling Fox News he's threatened to potentially withhold federal funding, blasting California's water management, and Democratic Governor Newsom, who recently spearheaded the effort in Sacramento to launch legal challenges to President Trump's policies. By the way, the last time President Trump came to the Los Angeles area was last September, ahead of the November presidential election. At the time, he spoke in Rancho Palos Verdes, which was impacted by landslides in recent years. President Trump then spoke to reporters at the Trump National Golf Course and met with the Rancho Palos Verdes mayor, John CRUIKSHANK, where the former president expressed support for the residents there. The Honorable John CRUIKSHANK joins us live here this afternoon. Thank you very much for taking the call here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Frank.
Last time President Trump was here, you introduced him at that news conference and that event at the Trump National Golf Course, and focused, of course, on the disaster in your city at the time, the landslides, which now, of course, are again an issue with the rain expected here in the forecast. Give us your impressions here of President Trump's handling of that situation and what's expected when he visits the area tomorrow.
Well, I think the way he's responded is night and day to how our governor responds to emergencies. When I met with President Trump, he took the time to listen to the problem. He expressed his concern, said that when he gets into office, he will help us. And, of course, he was there right at his golf course, which is less than a mile away from our landslide. It contrasts that to our current governor, who still has not visited our landslide area, even though our residents still, many of them do not have power or gas since July of last year. And albeit our issue in our city is much less dramatic and than what's going on with the fires that have happened, but it's still something that impacts many lives. And you just see the difference between the two different leaders, how they respond.
On the air live with the Honorable John CRUIKSHANK in Rancho Palos Verdes, and you happen to be a civil engineer, so certainly your city was very fortunate to have you as the leader there during that emergency, but you're following, of course, what's happening in the fire disaster zones and this epic rebuilding effort that's about to take place. What are your impressions about how this is going to unfold and how many years it might take?
Wow. So thank you for mentioning about that. I'm one of the few civil engineers that actually ran for government. And I tell my fellow civil engineers that they need to be more involved with local politics, because as we can see what's occurred, how important infrastructure is. Water supplies are for fighting fires. And of course, even before fires start, just the understanding of brush clearance and access and roads and all that. So I believe that just like with the Woolsey fire, people took years to rebuild there. Unfortunately, I think that many of the people that are in those areas probably saw that and had their homes burned and might not ever even move back, because it does just take way too long. Government needs to be more responsive, needs to be meeting the needs of people's for their residential situation where they might not ever be able to get back in their home. So my heart really goes out to all of them.
And sadly, this tragedy might be compounded now with mercifully rains coming this weekend, but with the danger of mudslides now. What potential impact might that have in the disaster area in your area there, and what might be expected here as rain starts to fall in the in the fire zone areas?
Right. Well, in our area of Rancho Palos Verdes, of course, we've had months to prepare for the winter, and it has not rained really as of now. So if rains occur in our area, I think we're better prepared than we've ever been in the past. I fear for the fire areas, which of course they're still not even contained, the fires, and there's potential of mudslides and major issues with landslides because of the pending water and the lack of vegetation, roots, and other things that actually hold our hillsides together. I know that the engineers in the city of Los Angeles and LA County have got their hands full with that.
Certainly, and certainly there's going to be a lot of rethinking when the reconstruction takes place. When you look at various construction sites now, as you drive through Southern California, you see it's wood construction because we are an earthquake country and wood bends when the earth moves. So we have wood construction here mostly, right? Which, of course, is a great danger when fire strikes. Do you think there might be some rethinking about construction materials?
No, I 100% think there'll be rethinking. I was just driving by the Getty Center today and looking up at some homes that are under construction with wood. And of course, wood is great when it comes to being an earthquake country, and it's also inexpensive relative to other building materials, but it's certainly not fire resistant. I think that we're going to be rethinking all the ways in which we build and provide water in our communities, because we now know that we're all vulnerable to fires, whether your homes are in Malibu or whether in Altadena. We all have to be prepared.
The Honorable John CRUIKSHANK in Rancho Palos Verdes, thank you very much for taking the call. We'll keep an open line to you and draw on your expertise. And if you do have the chance to connect with the president again, please let us know. John CRUIKSHANK, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Coming up next, stay tuned for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon right here. Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Hey, my name is Mandy Woodruff-Santos, career expert and host of Brown Ambition. Brown Ambition is conversations about wealth building.
Just know that debt is one of those things you can overcome.
Tell us how much debt you actually have, girl. Entrepreneurship. You get a book advance. How have you been doing it while running your business at the same time? What am I doing wrong? And being surrounded by sister friends.
We could talk about this all day.
No, I think my stress levels are high enough. Thank you. Brown Ambition. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.